What is going on, guys? Jacob here, Miami Dolphins Syndicate. So we now know, obviously, all the players that the Miami Dolphins have selected in the 2024 NFL Draft. You're looking at Chop Robinson, Patrick Paul, Jalen Wright, Muhammad Kamara, Malik Washington, Patrick McMorris, and Taj Washington. Within that, you have quite a few positions of need that I said the Miami Dolphins needed to address in the video that I made a couple weeks ago. Now I want to look at whether that draft actually ended up being good for the Miami Dolphins. And before I get into this, obviously, we don't really know with the players that have been selected whether they're going to be good or not, and therefore it can't really be answered today. Let me make that clear from the beginning. You cannot make that discernment today as to whether that was a good draft by the Miami Dolphins until all the players go out and play out their career. You look at what the first round picks have looked like for the last 3 years for the eventual Super Bowl champs. You don't find a lot of help that season. You look at George Karlaftis 2 years ago for the Chiefs. He had 6 sacks. That was best over the last 3 years out of guys selected in the first round. 3 years ago with the Rams didn't even have a first round pick and still ultimately won the Super Bowl. And then Felix something that the Chiefs selected last year in the first round only had like 1 sack on the season. Teams that usually go on to win the Super Bowl do not draft guys in the first round that immediately have a massive impact to help you win the Super Bowl. Usually, if you're getting great guys in the draft, it means you're high up in the draft. Therefore, you don't have a complete team together in general. And that's way more important. Getting a complete team together is way more important than hitting on 1 or 2 individual draft picks. With that sentiment, I think the Miami Dolphins have decided to go team first rather than top prospect first. I say that because you look at the guys that the Dolphins did draft. You're looking at Chop Robinson, Patrick Paul, and Jalen Wright just in their own realm, those first 3 guys. You assume none of those 3 guys are going to be coming in day one, assuming everybody is healthy, assuming the Miami Dolphins have a full slate of health, which probably isn't going to be the case, especially at the edge position. Jalen Phillips may be back. Bradley Chubb, still haven't heard a lot about whether he will be back or not, but the likelihood is week 1, at the very least, they will probably not be 100%, even if somehow both of them are good to go. So Chop Robinson could end up getting more snaps early on in the season than the Miami Dolphins probably would like based off these decisions that he made. You're looking at Patrick Paul, the second round pick. Both Austin Jackson and Teron Armstead last year, when they were healthy, played very well. We obviously know that Teron Armstead has his issues with injuries, so Patrick Paul could be that next guy in line and not have to play right away. And then Jalen Wright, you look at what we see in the running back room of the Miami Dolphins last year using a second-round pick on Devon Achane. Raheem Mostert just led the league in all-purpose touchdowns from the running back position and had himself his career year, the best year of his career, and is being obviously kept on this team. Jalen Wright then just provides another option for this Dolphins offense. And I really like his build, 5'10", 210 pounds. We're in a 4.3, 840, I believe. So he is a little bit bigger than the running backs that we already have on the roster, and he still has some speed to him. So he can and likely will play a very strong role on this Dolphins team, potentially even from day one. But none of these guys that we drafted, and the list goes on, the guys that we drafted later on in the draft, and then the undrafted free agents, none of these guys are going to have to be thrust into a position that they must be at the top of their game from the beginning of the season in order for the Miami Dolphins to have success. Something else that we talked about in that video was the fact that the Dolphins don't have a lot of clear holes. You look at the tight end position, they just went out and got Jonnu Smith. The offensive line, while name-wise we don't love the guys, we're probably going forward with the offensive line, especially on the interior of the offensive line. Anthony Brewer was a part of a not that good offensive line of the Titans. You're looking at Driscoll from the Eagles, was a career backup up until this point. Isaiah Wynn, probably like him the most, but he had that injury last year that saw him miss the entire end of the season. The offensive line, when healthy last year, was a top 10 rated offensive line. The secondary, they found ways to improve that despite losing Xavier Howard. The edge group, you're going into the offseason now without Jalen Phillips and without Bradley Chubb at full health, but you bring in Shaq Barrett, as well as some guys that were on the practice squad last year, and then you bring in 2 rookies through the drafts. If everything goes well, if everything goes right, those guys will not have to play. So the Dolphins, they are not looking for these guys to have massive impacts. They are looking at guys, they clearly looked at guys that are projects that can be potential long-term answers that will be able to sit on the sidelines and develop and take that approach to it. There are multiple approaches you can take to rookies and getting them up to speed. we've obviously seen with Aaron Rodgers, with Patrick Mahomes, with Jordan Love, with what's probably going to end up happening with Michael Penix is you at least sit a year with some of those guys, multiple seasons, just watch behind crafty veterans that know how to get a job done, then eventually step into that role, take over for them as a starter, and hit the ground running. That's hopefully what we can see with Chop Robinson, who is probably not going to be able to get the day one starting job. Patrick Paul, there's a chance that he might end up starting on the interior of the offensive line and maybe eventually working his way out to his preferred position of left tackle. But 6'7", 331 pounds, he has the frame at the very least to play on the interior of the offensive line. If he plays on the outside at the tackle position, you might want to see him lose a little bit of weight. But just with the build he is now, if they do want to thrust him in immediately day one, he can play on the interior. But as long as Armstead and Austin Jackson are healthy, he is not uprooting them from the starting positions. Same thing with Jaylen Warren. You have Achane, you have Mostert that just came off of career years. Achane obviously in his rookie season. And then the list goes on. Muhammad Kamara, same situation with Chop Robinson, that the edge position had a much more seasoned career at Colorado State. You actually see more results in impact statistically than you do with Chop Robinson. Malik Washington and Taj Washington, two wide receivers, two undersized guys, 5'9", 5'8", quicker. There's speed there. There is a role to be had that they could step into with that wide receiver 3 position. And then Patrick McMorris, safety position. You lose to Sean Elliott. There is going to be a competition to be had who is the starting safety alongside Javon Holland. So there are guys that can earn roles, but none of these guys are going to be thrust into roles. And that is what the Miami Dolphins have clearly decided, that they're going to be drafting guys that are still positions of need and still are positions of high value on this team. However, they are drafting guys that come into this situation with really no pressure on them. They don't have the pressure to have to immediately make an impact on this Miami Dolphins team. They can sit back and maybe even redshirt this season, some of these guys, and you still feel confident that once they are given the opportunity to succeed, they will have the proper coaching for the year or so leading up to that point. You sit behind some of the veterans that they have on this team, get to watch them play, and then eventually you step into that role maybe a year, maybe 2 years from now. I think that's really cool. I think that's a position that I have not seen the Miami Dolphins ever be able to afford to do. That means we have that deep of a roster that we can just have guys brought in with great draft capital, first, second round pick, that do not have to come in and play immediately. Tell me a time in Dolphins history, not Dolphins history, but at the very least in the 2000s. Tell me a time in the 2000s that the Miami Dolphins have been able to draft guys with great draft capital and not have to rely on them immediately. And oftentimes when they did that in the past, it didn't work. We've seen so many of the first round picks for the Miami Dolphins flop or not do great for the Dolphins and then go off and have success elsewhere. Personally, that makes me encouraged, not about the draft. Again, I'm not sure whether it was a good draft or not. Whenever these guys do get their opportunities and we do see how good they are, that is when we will then know how good they are as players. But I love the draft in the sense of this just tells me that the state of the Miami Dolphins, they feel like they are currently in a spot where they know they can compete this season. They know that they have a chance to win a Super Bowl this season, despite the guys that they lost on both sides of the ball. We know that there's been so many guys that have gone out the doors and so many new guys that have been brought in, mostly veterans on shorter deals, on cheaper deals that they could just get the guys that they can afford, guys that are willing to come in for a little bit less to have a chance potentially at a Super Bowl. Certainly had a chance to make the playoffs, if nothing else. That tells me that the front office, that tells me that head coach Mike McDaniel trusts the team that it has around them. So they're going to take a chance on some guys. They're going to take a chance on Chop Robinson, who is a little undersized, a little underweight, has not really performed in terms of stats in his collegiate career, but is clearly explosive, is clearly extremely athletic, and if he does develop, can be one of the best edge rushers in this league. You look at Patrick Paul, offensive lineman, only gave up 2 sacks. Yeah, he had some holding issues, and there are some other question marks around his game, particularly for me, just how big he is at the tackle position. You got to be able to move. However, if you have that large human being, that large mammoth of a man able to perform at the top of his game on the offensive line, you will have one of the best offensive linemen in all of college football, all of professional football. And then Jalen Wright, complimentary piece to Devon Achane, a little bit bigger, but still maintain that speed that fits so well into this offense. There are good traits to like about all of the guys that we have drafted. Muhammad Kamara, just in my group chat alone, I know I have some Jets fans in there, I have some Patriots fans in there, I have some Chargers fans, some Giants fans, some Bills fans in one of my group chats. And everybody was talking about where's Kamara going to go once day 3 started up. And I wasn't watching the draft at that point. Not even going to lie to y'all. There are talented players that the Miami Dolphins got in this draft. Are they all going to pan out? Probably not. But just with the state of this team currently, they don't have to. And I'm very happy to be a Dolphins fan at this point that the team believes so much in themselves that they don't have to go out and just grab the shiniest object to grab the best prospect. They went out and got guys that are going to be a little bit of projects, but this clearly means that they trust the coaching staff, they trust the development team to bring these guys to the best of their ability. Whether they work out or not, again, I keep saying this, we will have to wait and see. But I am encouraged just based off of what that tells me the Miami Dolphins believe about their own team. And I think they have a good reason to. You make the playoffs for multiple seasons in a row. If that team doesn't get beat up at the end of the year, who knows where we go. If you win just one more game, you get a home playoff game. You just keep seeing progression year by year. Yes, things aren't going exactly how we want. They haven't brought another ring in to the Miami Dolphins organization. And this wasn't the sexiest of drafts in the world. You want to feel that endurance rush whenever, not endurance, adrenaline rush whenever you make a very splashy pick in the NFL draft. That didn't happen for the Miami Dolphins. There wasn't really much splash for the Dolphins in this draft. Maybe the running back position, and you get some wide receivers. That's always fun. But there was not that one guy the Miami Dolphins were able to get that really is a shiny toy. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the project. I'm okay with whatever happens. I'm very enthusiastic, and I'm very excited to see where this Miami Dolphins team will go. So overall, I like to think it was a good draft. If I had to give it a rating, I'd give it just a solid, probably 7.5, because there is a very solid chance that some of these guys do flop. There are question marks about every single guy that we drafted. However, there is good upside to every single guy that we drafted. So I'm willing to sit with that 7.5 as things stands. We'll see what ends up happening as the players get to play out their NFL careers. Let me know your thoughts on these guys down below in the comments. While down there, hit the like button, hit the sub button. Y'all know what to do. Appreciate y'all very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Go Dolphins.